Transportational injuries, these are injuries due to transport, like for example, motorcycle transport or train transport, etc. So there are various forms of transportational injuries, and all the forms of transportational injuries are associated with the risk of, all forms of transport are associated with the risk or harm of injuries. Now, most books have mentioned like some five categories of transportational injuries. The first one being due to road traffic accidents or due to car injuries. The second one is motorcycle injuries or bike injuries. The third one being injuries due to train transport and aviation. Aviation is a $5 word for aeroplanes and stuff. And the last one is marine transport injuries, i.e. boat or ship accidents, etc. So this is all this is set of the global picture you should have in mind before beginning our lecture. And the main focus of our lecture is going to be injuries due to car transport, because no one expects you to know aviation and marine injuries, and trains are not that much functional in Pakistan. Trains are not that much functional in Pakistan. So I don't remember seeing any MCQ or any question related to train injuries in the past paper MCQs. So another important thing to bear in mind is that injury in transport does not just affects the pedestrian or the passerby. It also affects or injures the vehicle occupant, the driver and the passengers riding the vehicle. So moving on to our introductory slide, the next slide, and see what we have there. Main divisions of road traffic accidents. Like I previously mentioned, our focus will be road traffic accidents, the car accidents. And like I previously mentioned, there can be both the injury to the pedestrians, and also these car accidents can affect the vehicle occupants. Vehicle occupants include drivers and also the passengers of the car. Now, as you can see, let's go to a clean version of this slide. As you can see, I have underlined injuries to pedestrians because this is what we are going to study first. And after getting a little bit acquainted with the injuries to pedestrians, we will shift our focus to the injuries to vehicle occupants. Now, injuries to pedestrian can be impact injuries and non-impact injuries. Impact means when the car strikes the body, that is an impact. The collision between some things, like we would study in physics, the collision between particles, etc. That is known as impact. So when the car strikes the body, that is called impact injuries. And when the person falls off the car and hits some wall or ground or any other object other than the car, so that is included in the non-impact injuries. And if you haven't got that, we will go through different beautiful illustrations in the coming slides. So I hope everything will become clear. Let's move on to the next slide. Primary impact injuries. You see the site where the bumper hits the like at the level of the ankle or knee. I'm not very sure about it, that whether it's the knee or the ankle, but I think you can get a clear-cut view of what's the primary impact injury. It is the site where the car strikes first the body. It is the site of primary contact. It is the site of primary impact, i.e. the first site of collision between the car and the body of the victim. That is known as primary impact injuries. Now, after the primary impact injuries, there are secondary impact injuries. What are secondary impact injuries? After the car strikes the body gets a little bit, body loses the balance. So it falls on the car, and there is this second point of collision, second point of contact between the body and the car. This is known as secondary impact injuries. So variations will exist and variations do exist, but this is sort of the global picture. These are just introductory slides, and as we move forward, we will go through these different variations. So just try to have a global picture, try to have like a basic concept. These slides are just for building your basic concept. So as we previously mentioned, injuries to pedestrians were impact injuries and non-impact injuries. And now we have gone through two types of impact injuries. These are primary impact and secondary impact. Primary for first impact and secondary for the second impact. Now we are left with non-impact injuries. What are non-impact injuries? After the secondary impact with the car, the body loses even more balance. So it falls off and it hits the ground or some pole or anything other than the car. So these are known as secondary injuries. As you can see in this picture, the body loses balance and falls on the ground, and this causes injuries which are known as secondary injuries. And in the next slide, we are going to, there is a combined sort of review for what we have discussed up till now. So let's move on. You see, when the pedestrian is hit by a car from behind, there is primary impact, and this causes injuries known as primary impact injuries. Now the person then falls and on the vehicle, and there is a secondary point of contact. The second point of contact or secondary impact of the car or the secondary strike of the car on the body, this is known as secondary impact injuries. And finally, the person loses balance and falls off on the ground or anything other than the car. This causes injuries known as secondary injuries. So on the right side, on the right of the picture, there is a point of where the injuries you are expecting according to these pictures. It is not always like that. I will explain further after we go through this slide. Primary impact injuries. It kind of affects this ankle or knee region. As you can see here, the bumper strikes the knee region of the victim. So this is the site of this is the usual site of primary impact injuries in adults. Variations do exist, but this is the expected site where you will find the primary impact. And I think this is an KMU past paper MCQ too, that the bumper injuries are primary impact injuries or at the level of ankle, something like that. The secondary impact injuries, as you can see, the secondary impact injuries are here. So this is the point of secondary impact injuries. And finally, the person falls off the ground, forming secondary injuries. So secondary injuries will damage the hands. According to this illustration, it is not always like that, and also the head, if the head does strike the ground. Now, different sort of variations we are going to discuss in the coming slides, and those, the first one of those is the primary impact injuries. The primary impact injuries, I think we have already gone through what was that, what was the typical or the usual forensic pathology of the primary impact, and I previously mentioned that the variation do exist. So in the coming slide, we are just going to study the variations. The first variation is something called Weddell's Triad. And what is Weddell Triad? It is a classic pattern of injury seen in children, pedestrian children, who are struck by motor vehicle, and it comprises of fractured femoral shaft, intrathoracic or intra-abdominal injuries, and the contralateral head. There is a beautiful illustration of this. So why is this a variation? It is a variation because in adults, we expect the primary impact injury at the level of the knee. But since the child is small, the bumper reaches not the knee, but the chest region or the femoral shaft. So there is a damage to the femoral shaft. And then the bumper strikes the abdomen and chest region. And finally, when the child falls off, there is injury to the contralateral head region. This all sort of combined together forms a triad known as Weddell's Triad. So let's move and go through this once more. Weddell's Triad is a classic pattern of injury seen in pedestrian children who are struck by motor vehicles, and it comprises of fractured femoral shaft, intrathoracic or intra-abdominal injuries, and contralateral head injury. That is all about the variations in primary impact injuries. Now we will go through the variations that you can expect in the secondary impact injuries.